One of the 7 most controversial movies on Netflix right now. Netflix has a library with thousands of movies, but some of them come with a whole lot more baggage than just a good story. These are the films that sparked outrage, triggered global debates, and in some cases even faced calls to be banned. So, what are the real stories behind all the headlines? Today we're breaking down 7 of the most controversial movies to ever hit the platform and exploring the shocking reasons they tore audiences apart. Let's get into it. Kicking off our list is a film that was so visceral, so stomach-churning, that viewers stormed social media to report that it was literally making them sick. I'm talking about the 2018 psychological horror film, The Perfection. On the surface, the movie looks like a story about rivalry in the cutthroat world of classical music. Allison Williams plays Charlotte, a cello prodigy who returns to her prestigious music academy years after leaving to care for her dying mother. When she gets there, she meets Lizzie, played by Logan Browning, the new star pupil who has taken her place. What starts as a tense rivalry quickly spirals into a shocking and grotesque journey, filled with body horror, mind games, and some of the most unsettling twists in recent memory. The controversy around The Perfection isn't just about how graphic it is, though there's plenty of that. The film has scenes of mutilation, forced vomiting, and sexual assault that many viewers and critics felt were just exploitative. The real debate is whether the film is a clever takedown of the rape-revenge genre, or if it's just trauma porn trying to pass itself off as high art. The filmmakers themselves have kind of leaned into the shock value. Director Richard Shepard said he was influenced by the extreme cinema of South Korean directors like Park Chan-wook, who is known for films like Oldboy that intentionally keep the audience off balance with wild tonal shifts. Horror experts have pointed out that the outrage from viewers is, in a way, a sign that the film did exactly what it set out to do: get a massive reaction. It's designed to make you uncomfortable and to push buttons. But a lot of critics argue that the film's handling of its sensitive themes is, to put it lightly, clumsy. The plot centers on a shared history of sexual abuse the main characters suffered from their mentor. But the way this gets revealed, through a series of bizarre and violent acts the women inflict on each other, led to accusations of misogyny. Some argued the film uses the trauma of sexual assault as a cheap plot device to justify its shocking images. It was criticized for suggesting that surviving that kind of violence makes you stronger, and for seeming to excuse one character's horrific actions because of her past trauma. This was seen as deeply problematic, especially in a post-Me Too world, where we're having more critical conversations about how sexual violence is shown on screen. On top of all that, the film's queerness was another sore spot. It was marketed as an LGBTQ horror film, but some critics felt it fell into the old trap of using a same-sex relationship for shock value instead of genuine representation. The dynamic between Charlotte and Lizzie is complicated, mixing sensuality with manipulation and violence, but the question remains, is it a meaningful exploration of a queer relationship born from trauma, or just another case of exploiting female intimacy for the male gaze? Ultimately, The Perfection is a film that lives and dies by its ability to shock you. For some, it's a bold and gnarly revenge fantasy. For others, it's a flawed and irresponsible movie that cheapens its important themes with gore and a shallow take on trauma. It's a film that leaves you reeling, wondering not just about what you saw, but why the filmmakers chose to show it to you. Next on our list is a film whose controversy comes not from jump scares, but from a suffocating, relentless bleakness. The 2020 Southern Gothic thriller, The Devil All the Time, is a sprawling, multi-generational story of violence, faith, and corruption in the backwoods of Ohio and West Virginia. The film has a star-studded cast: Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, Bill Skarsgård, Sebastian Stan, but all that star power couldn't save it from deeply dividing audiences. The plot follows a loose group of disturbed characters whose lives intersect in violent and tragic ways. There's a haunted World War II veteran, a husband and wife serial killer team who prey on hitchhikers, a corrupt sheriff, and a predatory preacher. At the heart of it all is Arvin Russell, played by Tom Holland, a young man who seems to be the only moral compass in a world that has none, even though he himself turns to brutal violence. The controversy around The Devil All the Time comes directly from its tone and content. The film is just an unyielding parade of human misery, It's packed with graphic violence, disturbing depictions of religious fanaticism, and a sense of hopelessness that left a lot of viewers feeling empty and disturbed. The main question people wrestled with was, what's the point? Is this a deep commentary on the cycle of trauma and religious hypocrisy, or is it just misery for the sake of shock value? Critics were sharply split. Some praised the film for its unflinching look at a dark, forgotten corner of America, arguing its bleakness was crucial to its message about inherited trauma and the failure of authority. In that view, the film uses extreme violence to critique the violent foundations of American society itself. The authority figures, from the preacher to the sheriff, all use their power to hide horrific behavior, pointing to a deep rot in the community. On the other hand, many viewers and critics found the film to be an exercise in style over substance. They argued its sprawling story felt messy, and its characters were too underdeveloped to get emotionally invested in. From this perspective, the violence wasn't serving a greater theme, it was just there to shock. The film was accused of being too dark without offering any real insight, leaving viewers with a 2-hour-plus tour of human depravity. The hero, Arvin, also fueled the debate. He's presented as our protagonist, but he commits multiple murders. The film seems to suggest his actions are justified, a necessary response to the evil around him. This left audiences asking a tough question: does fighting evil with more violence make you a hero, or does it just keep the cycle going? The ending gives no easy answers, leaving Arvin's fate up in the air, and reinforcing the film's central theme of inescapable darkness. It's a challenging watch that refuses to give you any comfort, and for that reason it remains one of Netflix's most quietly unsettling films. Moving from fiction to reality TV, our next entry kicked off a global conversation about culture, tradition, and prejudice. I'm talking about the series Indian Matchmaking. When it first came out in 2020, the show followed Mumbai's top matchmaker, Seema Taparia, as she guided clients in India and the US through the arranged marriage process. And while the show became a pop culture phenomenon, it also faced immediate and widespread backlash for what many saw as a portrayal of regressive and discriminatory social norms. The controversy here isn't about one shocking scene, but the very DNA of the show. Throughout the series, the criteria for a suitable partner often revolved around preferences that are just deeply rooted in prejudice. Viewers and critics pointed to the rampant colorism, with frequent requests for a fair-skinned partner. They called out the blatant casteism, as families looked for matches only within specific upper-caste communities. And they highlighted the sexism, where female clients were often told to be less picky and more willing to compromise, while male clients' long lists of demands were catered to without a single question. For many in the South Asian diaspora, the show felt like airing the community's dirty laundry in public. Judging potential partners on skin tone, caste, and wealth are deeply painful issue, and the show was slammed for presenting them so casually, without any criticism. Matchmaker Seema Taparia became the face of this criticism. Her famous catchphrases, like telling clients they'll only ever get 60 to 70% of what they want and must learn to compromise, were seen as pushing patriarchal standards, where women are expected to sacrifice their ambitions for a marriage. The defense of the show, from its creators and some fans, is that it's simply holding up a mirror to reality. Executive producer Smriti Mundra acknowledged the criticism, but said almost no one claimed the show was inaccurate. The argument is that these prejudices, colorism, casteism, sexism, are real and common in the arranged marriage system, and the show isn't endorsing them, just documenting them. Supporters argue that by putting these uncomfortable truths on a global stage like Netflix, Indian Matchmaking actually started important conversations about these long-standing issues. But critics push back, arguing that showing something without critiquing it is a form of normalization. By not challenging or even questioning these discriminatory demands, the show was accused of endorsing and perpetuating them. The series was also criticized for focusing only on affluent, upper-caste Hindu families, which gave a very narrow and stereotypical view of India's 1.3 billion people. This lack of diversity, especially not including Muslim, Christian, or lower caste voices, just added fuel to the fire. The debate was reignited with new seasons, and got even more complicated when one of the participants, Pradyuman Malu, faced allegations of domestic violence, raising more questions about the values and people the show was platforming. Indian matchmaking is a fascinating case study in the complexities of cultural representation. Is it a harmful series that reinforces dangerous stereotypes, or a valuable, if uncomfortable, look at a traditional practice colliding with modern life? The answer, a lot like the matchmaking process itself, is incredibly complicated. Our fourth film is one of the most polarizing biopics ever made, a movie that was generating controversy from the moment it was announced. I'm talking about Andrew Dominik's 2022 film, Blonde, a fictionalized and brutal telling of the life of Marilyn Monroe. Starring Ana de Armas in a truly transformative performance. The film isn't your typical biography. It's based on a novel by Joyce Carol Oates, which is itself a work of fiction that uses Monroe's life to explore fame, trauma, and exploitation. And that's exactly where the trouble starts. The film got a rare NC-17 rating for its graphic content, and it does not hold back in showing harrowing scenes of abuse. We see Norma Jean Baker, the woman who became Marilyn Monroe, abused by her mentally unstable mother, sexually assaulted by a studio head, beaten by her husband Joe DiMaggio, and subjected to a degrading encounter with President John F. Kennedy. The main accusation against Blonde is that it's the ultimate example of trauma porn. Critics and viewers argued that the film fixates on Monroe's suffering to an almost obsessive degree, reducing one of the 20th century's biggest icons to nothing more than a perpetual victim. Model Emily Ratajkowski was one of many who slammed the film for fetishizing female pain even in death. The line between fact and fiction is deliberately blurred, which many found deeply disrespectful to Monroe's memory. The film invents a polyamorous relationship with the sons of Charlie Chaplin and Edward G. Robinson, and controversially shows Monroe having 2 forced abortions. One of those scenes, featuring a talking CGI fetus, was heavily condemned by organizations like Planned Parenthood for spreading anti-abortion propaganda. This creative license led to a fierce debate about the ethics of biopics. Even though the film is based on a novel, it uses Marilyn Monroe's real name and image. Critics asked if it was ethical to invent such traumatic events and present them as part of her story, potentially misleading audiences who don't know the difference. Director Andrew Dominik was largely unapologetic about the backlash. He said his goal wasn't to create a historically accurate record, but to adapt the feeling of the book and explore how childhood trauma shapes a person's life. He saw Monroe as a symbol, an American goddess of love whose tragic end said something profound about our culture. Joyce Carol Oates, the author of the novel, also defended the film, calling it a brilliant and sincere telling of Norma Jean's story that was meant to expose sexual predation in Hollywood. But even that defense was controversial. Many felt that in trying to critique the exploitative system of old Hollywood, the film just ended up replicating the very exploitation it was trying to condemn. The camera lingers on Monroe's broken, tear-streaked face and naked body, and the relentless focus on her pain arguably erases her agency, her talent, and her intelligence. We see the icon, but we rarely see the artist or the savvy businesswoman she was known to be. Blonde is a masterful film from a technical standpoint, with stunning visuals and a haunting score, but it is also a difficult and deeply uncomfortable watch. It forces you to confront the brutality that often lies under the glamorous surface of fame. The debate it started is about more than just one film. It's about how we tell the stories of real people, especially women whose lives have already been picked apart by the public. Is it a powerful feminist critique or just another, more artfully disguised form of exploitation? Alright, we are just over halfway through our list, and the controversies are only getting more intense. These are films that really challenge us and force some tough questions. And speaking of questions, I have one for you. Which of these films so far do you think went too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're finding this breakdown interesting, now would be a great time to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss more deep dives into the world of film. Now let's get back to the list. Next up is a title that, while technically a series, created the kind of cultural impact and controversy you'd expect from a major movie event. It kicked off a global debate about mental health, teen suicide, and the responsibility of a streaming giant. I am, of course, talking about 13 Reasons Why. Based on the 2007 novel by Jay Asher, the first season, released in 2017, tells the story of Hannah Baker, a high school student who takes her own life and leaves behind 13 cassette tapes, each one detailing a person and an event she says led to her decision. The show was a massive instant hit, but it was also met with immediate and fierce criticism from parents, schools, and mental health professionals. The controversy was all about the show's graphic and explicit depictions of suicide, sexual assault, and bullying. In the original cut of the Season 1 finale, the camera showed Hannah's suicide in excruciating detail. Mental health experts warned that showing something that graphic could be dangerous, potentially leading to a contagion effect or copycat suicides among vulnerable teens. School districts across the country sent out warnings to parents about the show. The debate was fierce. On one side, the show's creators and fans argued their goal was to start an honest, unflinching conversation about difficult topics that are often swept under the rug. They believed that by showing the brutal reality, they were raising awareness and encouraging teens to get help. The show was praised by some for its strong performances and for being a compelling adaptation. They argued that shying away from the graphic nature of it all would have been a disservice to the story. On the other side, a chorus of experts argued that the show, no matter its intentions, was deeply irresponsible. Organizations like the National Association of School Psychologists issued warnings that the show could sensationalize and even romanticize suicide. The very structure of the story, where Hannah's suicide is the event that makes everyone finally listen to her, was seen as promoting a dangerous idea that suicide could be a tool for revenge or a way to become a martyr. Studies were later published that seemed to back up these fears, with some research showing a measurable spike in teen suicides in the months after the show's release. The backlash was so huge that Netflix eventually took the unprecedented step of editing the controversial suicide scene out of the first season, more than 2 years after it first aired. They also added stronger trigger warnings and directed viewers to mental health resources. But the controversy didn't stop there. Later seasons, which went beyond the original book, were criticized for becoming overly dramatic and for continuing to feature graphic scenes of violence, including a particularly brutal scene with a mop handle that caused a whole new wave of outrage. Critics argued the show had lost its way and was now just exploiting trauma for shock value. 13 Reasons Why remains a landmark case in the conversation about depicting sensitive topics in media. It forced a global reckoning with the real-world impact of on-screen content and raised huge questions about the line between raising awareness and causing harm. Coming in at number 6 is a film with a rare and dubious honor, a 0% score on Rotten Tomatoes, that somehow became a global sensation. The 2020 Polish erotic thriller, 365 Days, is one of the most watched non-English films in Netflix history, and also one of its most hated. The controversy here isn't subtle. It's about the film's central premise, which critics and activists have slammed for glamorizing kidnapping, sexual assault, and Stockholm Syndrome. The plot is simple and deeply problematic. A young Polish woman, Laura, is on vacation in Sicily when she's kidnapped by Massimo, a handsome and powerful member of the Sicilian mafia. He tells her that he's giving her 365 days to fall in love with him. If she doesn't, he promises to let her go. What follows is a movie filled with steamy sex scenes, lavish wealth, and a storyline that presents a violent, coercive relationship as a passionate romance. The backlash was swift and severe. Critics tore the film apart for romanticizing a deeply abusive dynamic. The idea of Stockholm Syndrome, where a captive develops feelings for their captor, wasn't shown as a complex psychological issue, but as the peak of romance. Petitions demanding Netflix remove the film got tens of thousands of signatures. Perhaps most powerfully, the Welsh singer Duffy, who had recently shared her own harrowing story of being kidnapped and raped, wrote an open letter to Netflix's CEO. She called the film irresponsible for glamorizing the brutal reality of sex trafficking, kidnapping, and rape, and argued that it distorts sexual violence as a sexies movie. But the film's fans saw things very differently. Fueled by viral TikTok trends where people would film their reactions to the movie's most explicit scenes, 365 Days shot to the top of Netflix's charts in over 90 countries. For many viewers, it was pure escapist fantasy, often compared to 50 Shades of Grey, but seen as even more daring. They were drawn in by the attractive leads, the luxurious settings, and the taboo story. Some fans even joked on social media about wanting to be kidnapped by Massimo. This huge disconnect between the film's popularity and the intense criticism put Netflix in a tough spot. The platform is famously data-driven, and the data was clear. People were watching. Despite the public outcry, Netflix not only refused to remove the movie, but went on to produce 2 sequels. This decision raised major questions about the ethical duties of streaming platforms. Is the goal just to give people what they want, even if the content is potentially harmful? Or is there a duty to avoid platforming narratives that glorify abuse? 365 Days and its sequels are a stark example of this dilemma. They're films that are by most critical standards awful, yet they are undeniably successful. The controversy it created isn't just about one film, but about the power of an audience to elevate problematic content and the responsibility of the platforms that provide it. And finally, we arrive at what is arguably the single most controversial movie in Netflix's history. A film that sparked a massive social media movement, political condemnation, and even a criminal indictment. This is the 2020 French film Mignon, released on Netflix as Cuties. No film on this list shows the gap between a filmmaker's intent and public perception quite like this one. The film won the directing award at the prestigious Sundance Film Festival. It was written and directed by Maïmouna Doucouré and is based on her own experiences growing up as a Senegalese French girl. It tells the story of Amy, an 11-year-old from a conservative Muslim family in Paris. Feeling lonely at home, she becomes fascinated by a group of her peers, a dance crew called the Cuties, who perform highly sexualized twerking routines inspired by what they see on social media. Director Maïmouna Doucouré has been crystal clear that her film is a critique of the hypersexualization of young girls, not a promotion of it. She spent over a year and a half researching the topic, interviewing young girls to understand the pressures they face from platforms like TikTok and Instagram, where sexualized imagery often equals popularity. The film is meant to be a social commentary, an alarm bell warning us that we are forcing children to grow up too fast. That is not, however, how the film was received, thanks in large part to a disastrous marketing campaign by Netflix. The promotional poster Netflix made was completely different from the one used in France. It featured the 4 young actresses in revealing dance outfits striking provocative poses. That single image, released before anyone could even watch the film, was all it took to ignite a firestorm. The poster went viral, and accusations flew that Netflix was promoting child exploitation. The hashtag #CancelNetflix trended worldwide, with thousands of people vowing to unsubscribe. The controversy quickly turned political. Politicians called for investigations, and a grand jury in Texas actually indicted Netflix on criminal charges for promoting lewd material depicting a child. Netflix apologized for the inappropriate poster and replaced it, but the damage was done. The company stood by the film itself, defending it as social commentary, but most people had already made up their minds based on the poster and out-of-context clips of the dance scenes that were flying around online. This created a bizarre situation where the people condemning the film and the filmmaker who made it were theoretically on the same side. Both were worried about the sexualization of children. But the perception of the film was so poisoned by the marketing that its actual message was completely lost in the noise. Those who have actually watched the film often point out that the dance scenes are intentionally uncomfortable to watch. They aren't framed as glamorous. The main character, Amy, is shown to be confused and conflicted, and her attempts to mimic the adult sexuality she sees online ultimately get her rejected by both her family and her new friends. The film doesn't end with a triumphant dance performance, but with Amy finding joy in just being a kid, playing with other children. But all of that nuance was completely bulldozed by the outrage. Cuties serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the gap between artistic intent and public reception, and how a single marketing mistake can turn a film intended as a critique into the very thing it was trying to condemn. So there you have it! 7 of the most controversial films to ever land on Netflix. From graphic violence and ethical debates, to the glamorization of abuse and the sexualization of children, these films have all pushed boundaries and sparked furious debate. They force us to confront uncomfortable questions about art, responsibility, and the power of media. They are not easy films to watch, and they certainly don't offer easy answers. But whether you see them as dangerous and irresponsible, or as vital, challenging works of art, one thing is certain: they get people talking. And now I want to hear from you. Which of these movies do you think is the most controversial? Are there any films you think I missed from this list? Let me know everything in the comments section below. I read every single one. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.